our Constitution.
Right. That becomes, once we achieve statehood in 1837, January 26, 1837, that is our ratified and enacted Constitution. So it took us almost a year and a half for that to happen. And what we got in return through all those negotiations was the western half of the Upper Peninsula, which at the time was literally known on the maps as no man's land. They thought it was a barren area.
Let's go back for a little bit. So when we have the two governors, and what are they like? Sharing the same office, or what? How's that work?
I wish I knew, because as I looked at the dates when I was doing some research on this, they had to cohabitate. There was only one. There was only one Capitol building, obviously. So, and
it's
it was
in Detroit.
It's in Detroit. It's a very small territorial Capitol building. Later became a high school. So it's a very small building. There's
Governor Horner's probably not too popular.
No. In fact, I believe there were some accounts that he had to sequester himself to keep away from some angry mobs.
So he probably wasn't in the Capitol much himself.
No. But it is interesting that we, as far as who had the authority to act, we were pretty unique, I think, in the fact that we were acting like a state almost 2 years before the United States government recognized us as a state.
So let's see. We adopt our Constitution. We elect Stevens T. Mason, and the legislature is now a state legislature. We would say, or Michigan would say. They meet and they enact some laws. 1835, 1836. And they, I think, then elect 2 U.S. senators who go to Washington, but
they're not recognized.
They're not recognized.
They're not recognized. So, again, during this is the time when there's feverish negotiations on how to settle the.
Are we done with the fighting?
We're done with the fighting. The dispute's over. The line's been resurveyed, and Toledo's now part of Ohio. So it's not clear why there was such a lag between when Horner came into office and cleared the decks and paved the way for Ohio to take Toledo, between that and us finally being recognized. I imagine some of it was probably due to the shadow Mason cast upon himself by the way he acted with President Jackson. He was always very laudatory of President Jackson, but then his actions were exactly the opposite.
The compromise that comes about, where we get the uninhabited lands and the rest of the Upper Peninsula, the people have to approve that. There's some ratification process.
I believe what you're referring to is, I think we're collectively remembering the Frostbitten Convention, which happened in late 1836. At which time the land was offered as a compensation for the Toledo Strip, and not surprisingly, the people at this convention probably didn't see that as a very good compromise at the time. When it was finally agreed to take that, I mean, what's ironic is later on we find this vast mineral wealth that shapes a large part of Michigan's history in the region that we acquired in place of Toledo, and the Maumee River never became the dynamic port city or port location that they thought it to be.
So it turned out in the end it was probably a pretty good deal for Michigan.
Yeah, people say we still won even though we lost the Toledo War.
Now, you brought these archives today. What other resources are there regarding the Toledo War?
There's actually, these 3 documents are part of a larger folder of documents that are just from the Toledo War dispute. So these came to us from territorial papers that were saved over time, and there's all sorts of communications and affidavits and warrants that detail all the events that we just talked about.
The militia records, some of these other
the listings of the people that served in the Toledo War. We have here a book titled Michigan's Early Military Forces, and I probably got that title wrong. It's Michigan's Early military forces. And this has a listing of every single individual that served in the Toledo War. And these records were gleaned from papers in the archives.
Do you think like a couple hundred people would have served?
Yeah, I know that they mustered forces of 160 and 200 at 2 different times, so I'm guessing we're talking anywhere between 300 and 500 individuals. We also have maps. You know, we showed this smaller map. We have several maps that show the strip area blown up. We have maps of the actual surveys that were done when Michigan was a territory, both before and after the dispute was settled. So, surprisingly, there's a large amount of material on this time period.
Now, Mark, this might be out of your scope of interest because this would take us outside of Michigan's borders. But would there be any sites, you know, that are relevant to visit if one was, you know, traveling to Toledo? I wonder if there are any.
I don't know if there's any Ohio historic markers. I'd be surprised if there weren't. And you probably would be able to find information on the Battle of Phillips Corners as well. I think what's interesting, speaking of crossing the border, what's interesting is that, you know, we talked about how this was a serious fight at the time, and a lot of people sort of interpret the rivalry between the University of Michigan and Ohio State having roots in this conflict. HBO did a special on that rivalry this past fall, and they actually came to the archives for some of these materials. So they used one of our maps for that and some of these other documents, and they basically referenced the Toledo War as the root of the U of M OSU rivalry. And in 1978, there was a gentleman working for the Department of Transportation that took things into his own hand and published a map that had 2 fictitious towns.
The official state map.
The official state map that the governor puts their signature stamp on, and there were 2 fictitious towns. One was Go Blue, and the other was Beat OSU, and somebody lost their job over that over that one.
But so, it was worth it.
Yes.
So we should say something about the archives. We have a couple minutes left. These documents that you brought today, are these something the public could see if somebody made a trip to the archives?
Yep. These are, I should say that these look old because they are the originals, and these are available for public to view the documents. We're open 5 days a week. Right now we're open, the research room is open 4 hours a day, 5 days a week. Anyone can come in, look at these materials. We have over 100 million maps, photographs, and documents in our collection that details Michigan's history.
And you're just a couple blocks from the Capitol.
Right, we're in the same building as the museum and the Library of Michigan.
Thank you, Mark. My guest has been Mark Harvey, the state archivist, and we've been talking about Michigan's boundary dispute with Ohio. Thanks for watching my program, Current Events. I'll be back next week.